It's Friday morning. It's time for our Cal preview. Let's talk about it all right here on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Friday. Welcome to Locked On Huskies. I'm Rome Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies with Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You know us. And thank you for all the everydayers out there for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Lars Hanson. You're still fighting through the sickness bug here. I was going to say the injury bug. That's not what's going on. But welcome. It's time for our full game preview, as we love to do here on the Friday episode of Locked On Huskies. So we're going to start with the offense. What is the number one thing that you are looking for as the Huskies take on the Cal Bears?
I think, when you look at this Cal defense, they're better at stopping the pass than they are at stopping the run. Not to say that they can't stop the run, but I think this kind of is one of those games where Michael Penix in the offense, we saw it against Michigan State where they were able to get going early. The running game was able to balance it out. But I think this is kind of one where Penix wants to set the tone early so that way you can let the running game kind of carry you through the rest of the game, right? I think this is going to be one game where Michael Penix and the offense are going to want to hit early on, get that lead early. We saw it against Idaho last week where Cal was able to fall down to a 17-0 hole in the first half. So I think and there's a massive gulf between Idaho and Washington. But my point of what I'm getting at there is once you get that 24-point cushion, that 17-point cushion, then you can allow Dillon Johnson to eat, Will Nixon to eat. And it kind of just becomes an easier day for Michael Penix and the offense to where they can take their shots when they want to, and you have full control of the game, which is what Washington wants to have.
So I like your point, but I disagree in a sense where we're going to talk about the same thing here, but I think it's going to be the other way around because what we saw last time, and I was watching all the film of this yesterday of Cal's matchup with the Huskies in 2022, where the Huskies down in Berkeley escaped with a 28-21 victory. Shout out to Marshawn Lynch for one of the greatest interviews of all time on the sidelines in that game. But the thing that stood out to me the most from that game was how often Cal just dropped 7 or 8 defenders all past the sticks. And we're forcing Michael Penix to just take a dump off over and over and over and over again. I wrote about this on Inside the Huskies as it pertains to Dillon Johnson. And there were so many 5- and 6-man boxes that the Huskies lined up against and just didn't run the ball. And I think that if there's any scenario where they're going to line up and just say, okay, we're going to establish the run early on, it's this game. Because if, let's say Dillon Johnson gets cooking early, right? He, through the first 2 or 3 drives, let's say he has 60 yards and a touchdown, maybe 2. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. We'll get to I got some Dillon Johnson bold predictions that we'll get to, but let's just say that that's the game plan early. And you bring Cal's defense that did give Michael Penix a little bit of trouble in some of the, through some of the drives that they faced off with last year. If he's able to just kind of bring those guys a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, then that really opens up everything the Huskies want to do, because Justin Wilcox and defensive coordinator Peter Sirmon were very strict in their game plan of we're going to keep everything in front of us. And they did a fantastic job of that last time.
See, I agree with your point, but it's almost like for the opposite reason, because here's the thing. Cal knows Washington's going to want to start with the run game, right? I think even though we all know Michael Penix, we've seen it clearly through the first 3 drives of the last 2 games. Ryan Grubb wants to run the ball, and it kind of hasn't necessarily come to fruition as much as it did against Michigan State a little more, right? Where you got Dillon Johnson on a few carries.
If you go back and watch the Michigan State game, there was a lot more throwing early than there was running. They kind of did that run to set up the pass kind of thing a little bit more often against Michigan State, and I think that because it was very clear from just like the very first play against Cal last year, it was we are not getting beat deep. We're just not allowing that to happen. And just kind of looking at what Penix and the rest of the offense can do, I think that we're going to see that early on. So it's just kind of take the chunk. The first couple of drives might be a lot longer than we're expecting from the Huskies. But if they're able to put points on the board and get in the end zone, then it's all about like Cal wants the Huskies to just kind of take the short passes and just keep everything in front of them. And if Ryan Grubb says, okay, I didn't really want to do that last time, but we are going to do that this time. And we're just going to eat just eat up 7-8 yards on every single play instead of, going for 15, 16-yard gains, just like those 30-yard bombs like we saw Jalen McMillan on the first play against Michigan State. If they're able to just kind of establish like, okay, yeah, we'll play your game and, we can beat you at that too, that kind of forces Sermon and Wilcox to adjust. And then, there's Rome Odunze 60 yards for a touchdown.
Right. Well, I think the ironic part of this offense is it doesn't really matter how it happens. You just know it's going to happen. So exactly. It's almost like it's the luxury that Washington has where, okay, you could lead. The other thing we have to remember about Dillon Johnson is he can also be just as good as a pass catcher. Right. So I think you might actually see where the running backs and Will Nixon is kind of that same way, where they might be taking those dump down underneath that go for 15 to 20 yards. So it's not necessarily a handoff to the running back, but it's maybe the receivers going deep, taking everything, and then you got West over the middle. You got Will Nixon or Dillon Johnson out the backfield, things like that. So I think there's different ways that they can do it. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, we've seen how not stubborn. Let me see if I can get the wording right here. Where Ryan Grubb has admitted it's hard to run the ball when you're throwing so well. And I think for Washington, no matter what, we're going to see more pass and run coming out. Even though I just contradict myself because they've tried to run the ball more. I think the passing game has been just so effective that even if you're taking 60 yards on the offense and it's a 5-yard run for Dillon Johnson at the end of the drive to cap off for a touchdown, you're still leaning on the passing game a little bit more. It just depends on who's ending up with the ball in their hands.
No, that's absolutely right, because you're right. If it's a dump down, like just a dump off to Dillon Johnson, that's still a pass. But it's just kind of this, okay, you want us to do this. Okay, we're going to do that, and we're still going to be better than you at it. Right. And I'm going to jump ahead of myself, and I won't go into the full numbers, and I'll save that for the final segment. But I think that when we look back at the end of the season, this is going to be one of the heaviest Dillon Johnson usage games that we see by the end of the year, because we saw Cal's defense just get really spread out. There were a lot of defensive backs on the field, and they were playing pretty deep, like through the entire game. So if we saw it during spring practice, and we saw it a little bit in the fall too, Dillon Johnson, the SEC running back against just any defensive back, that's not going to end well for those defensive backs. So it's just going to be, all right, we're going to eat up these short yards here and there. And that's why I just kind of want to say that, I could see them running the ball a lot early and often, just so they Sermon and Wilcox are forced to commit these extra bodies into run support, and then they're just going to get beaten over the top.
Right. Well, I think the other thing too is, especially against a team like Cal, where it's going to be a 4-quarter slugfest. We know Cal is obviously not as good as Washington is, but it just always seems to be, not that they're playing down to them, but that Cal plays up to Washington. Yes. Right. I think that's more or less going to be the case than as we touched on earlier in the week, the Chris Peterson teams that played down to Cal. I think this Washington team really likes to get the best out of. They're going to get the best punch. They're going to get the best punch, and they're going to get the best effort out of every team.
Absolutely.
I think Cal is kind of that team to where they're stubborn on defense, right? They're really good. It's a defensive head coach, Justin Wilcox, Peter Sermon, well known at Washington. So it's not going to be an easy one. And I think that's why that second half with the run game and controlling, I think that's where the run game is going to play. I can see them running for 220 yards in the second half, whereas they might only run for 80, 90, $110 maybe combined, right? With Dillon Johnson, Will Nixon, and a few others in the first half.
No, I do like that point. And I just think obviously we'll see how the game plays out. It'll be about 24 hours from kickoff by the time most people are probably listening to this. But I'm just really curious to see how this is going to play out, because through 3 games, we've seen the Huskies do pretty much whatever they want to at will, especially when it comes to the passing attack. And when we get into some of these conference games where the opposing defenses are a little bit more familiar with what Washington wants to do, I'm just curious to see how Ryan Grubb wants to adjust. That's something I asked him about on Monday. I said, are you going to adjust? And he kind of said, well, no, we're going to make opposing defenses adjust to us, which is kind of why I wanted to make that point of, they're going to adjust, because I think that they can, if they wanted to rip off 10, 15-yard runs against this Cal defense on most plays, that it's going to be very possible.
Right. And I mean, I think we touched on it earlier, which is how are they getting those 10 to 15 yards? Is it Dillon Johnson on a carry? Is it Dillon Johnson on a pitch? Is it
a little screen, maybe?
Jalen McMillan hitting Jack Westover for 15? I mean, there's so many ways that the offense can get the yardage. It's just it's a luxury of who is the one delivering it.
That's very true. And now, before we switch over to the defensive side of the ball, it's time to take a minute here and talk about our friends over at LinkedIn. Because these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's really easy. All you have to do is add your job with the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And, just to kind of continue with the ad reads here, are you missing the syrup for your pancakes? Or you just ran out of your favorite coffee creamer? With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can get what you want right when you need it. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or we'll make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. Want even more value? You can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with the Dash Pass membership. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKDOWNCollege to checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKDOWNCollege. Don't forget, that's code LOCKDOWNCollege for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Big breath after all that. Now it's time to get into the defense. We're gonna just kind of to flip the script here. Now it's time to talk about Washington's defense against Cal's offense. Lars, what stands out the most to you?
So I went through the first 3 games of Cal. I didn't watch the North Texas game because North Texas is North Texas, and the game kind of just took a different route. I looked at the second week against Auburn and the third week against Idaho. 2 very different teams, obviously, both in quality, talent, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing that stood out to me, the one thing Cal can do is run the ball. That's basically what their offense is. They have 3 different running backs. Jade Knott, who sounds like Justin Wilcox said on Tuesday that he should be healthy and good to go for Saturday. He didn't play against Idaho. Isaiah Enfries transferred from Montana State, went to Bellevue, not Eastside Catholic, went to Bellevue.
Got that right.
Ended up having a 100-yard game for himself. So I think, and again, opponent being what they are, right? You still just look at the production, right? No matter what it is, because again, you can run for nothing or you can run for everything. But again, the fact that their staple is running the ball, because when you look at their quarterback play, Ben Finley didn't start against Idaho. He played marginally against Auburn in week 2, got benched basically right before the first half. Sam Jackson, the 5th, came in. Didn't really fare that much better, if I'm being completely honest. And I think the one thing that Washington might struggle with, and I do expect Sam Jackson, the 5th, to start, he can run the ball. He's a very fluid runner, which kind of gets back to the Taylor Green thing against Boise State, where Washington at times has struggled with running quarterbacks. So it might actually be more advantageous for Cal to start Sam Jackson because of that element. And then when you add in the running backs with it could make things a little challenging, but everything starts with stopping the run. And they did that against Michigan State. So I don't see any reason why that can't. But then again, that's where that kind of X factor of Sam Jackson kind of comes into play, where if he's, keeping options and breaking things and things like that, that's how Cal will stay on the field and stay alive against Washington.
No, you're absolutely right, because that is the number one point that I wanted to hit on too, because we've kind of seen what this Husky defense can do in both aspects of the game, against the run and the pass. And that's still the big question that we have, right? Is, can this Husky defense defend mobile quarterbacks? And that's a question that is going to pop up again and again and again this season. Jaden DeLora we'll be talking about him a lot next week. Bo Nix was going to be right after that. Caleb Williams later in the year. These questions are going to pop up over and over and over again. And this is going to be a good test for that. And because you're right. Cal isn't super effective throwing the ball. Shout out to Taj Davis, former UW receiver, who we will see this week. But it's something where that's not what you're worried about. You're worried about getting beat on the ground. And I have a feeling that we're going to see a very similar game plan to what we saw against Michigan State, where the box is crowded and it's just, we dare you to beat us one-on-one. because I talked to Chuck Morrell on Wednesday, and one of the things that because I just kind of asked him, I said, when you have guys like Jabbar Muhammad, Elijah Jackson, Thaddeus Dixon, who just love playing man coverage, does that make, kind of calling different things a little bit easier, like you're a little bit more confident run support? And the gist of his answer was, well, yeah, I mean, obviously we want them to do a whole lot of different things, but it's really fun because that's what all cornerbacks love to do. And the fact that they have guys who can do that at a high level just makes a lot of things on the defense way easier.
Jack Westover and Cal's receivers have the exact same amount of receiving touchdowns.
That's wild.
That's also a fact. That blows my mind.
I know it's a fact. That's what makes it wild.
And so I think that kind of almost underscores your point of like, okay, there's, what, if Cal, let's run with this. If Cal happens to be Washington or just hang with Washington in the second half, right? If you're beating us in the pass game, more power to you, because the run game can't be the reason that if Washington's getting gashed for 10, 12, that's the problem. You'd rather have somebody. You'd rather have Elijah Jackson or Thaddeus Dixon or somebody, having a holding penalty that tries to wipe out a touchdown, that sort of thing, versus getting gashed in the run game, because you already know that's where Cal's bread and butter is. So I think you're willing, to your point. I mean, Jabbar Muhammad's not going to get tested again. We already know that. So I think the question is, does Cal have another receiver that isn't covered by Jabbar Muhammad that can cook? I mean, Taj Davis has a touchdown. Right? He's got a quarter of the Golden Bears touchdowns this year. I don't necessarily know if I'm sorry, I had to. I don't know necessarily if they do, right? So I think that's kind of where Washington's pass defense should be able to hold their own and really force Cal into running the ball. And if they can, then it's over.
So are we also going to say then that Jack Westover has a quarter of Washington's passing touchdowns this year, or receiving touchdowns? Because that is also true. But no, I like that a lot, and it's something where we saw the one guy that I really wanted to highlight in this, outside of Edifoni Lefosio, who we kind of know what kind of impact he can have against the run, is Vince Nunley, who looks like he's in line to start again this week. Cameron Fabikilanen, we'll kind of see what his status is. It does look like he's in line to play, but Vince Nunley played so well that it's going to be really hard to keep him off the field. And even if he doesn't start, he looked awesome just kind of coming downhill in run support. And that was another guy that I talked to Chuck Morrell about, where he was just kind of like, yeah, no, it's been really great to kind of see him. We did have big plans for him last year, and the injury that he suffered really early on in the season was a huge bummer, because we were really excited about just some of the possibilities that we were just kind of able to have with him on the field.
Yeah, and I think Cam is kind of he's more of a cover. Not that Cam can't help in the run support, but I think of the two, Vince has proven to be a little bit better in run support. So I think especially against Cal, that's kind of where it's going to lead. Now, if again, to our point here, if Cal starts pushing deep and actually Washington's giving up a few more passing yards and completions and things like that, you might see Cam Fab check in and just kind of take away that element just to get back into the run, focusing on forcing Cal to run the ball.
Right. And the one person that I also want to cover in this segment before we move on here is Braylon Trice, because we've talked about him on the segment before, or excuse me, just on the show before a lot, because he's very talented. He still doesn't have a sack this year, and I feel like this might be the game where we see him finally get on the stat sheet with that first sack of the year. And again, we've talked about how the fact that he doesn't have a sack has nothing to do with his skill or anything that has anything remotely to do with what's going on with him on the field. He's just seeing so many blockers every single week. And he got Cal twice last year. He was able to record 2 sacks. And I wouldn't be surprised if we just see him get at least one this week, because if Cal wants to run the ball and they just kind of can't do it effectively, like we think is very, very possible, then Braylon Trice is going to have a lot of scenarios where he's just going to be able to get after the quarterback, and we'll probably see some one-on-one opportunities with whoever's lined up across from him. And we know for certain from watching him for as long as we have that he's going to win those more often than not.
Exactly. I mean, it's really kind of the perfect recipe game for Braylon, to where, especially if they have a running quarterback, now he's going to be more susceptible and more vulnerable he's going to be outside the pocket, right? He's going to be already scrambling around, and that's just where Braylon eats. I mean, it's where Zion ate up Noah Kim, right? When Noah Kim got outside the tackle box, Zion chased him down, forced a fumble, got a sack, didn't get credit for the 4. So I think, that being said, it's again, it's not for a lack of he's not there, he's not doing his job, he's diminished, he's taking a step back. No, he's actually, I think, honestly, taking a step up. Right? He's actually improved this year where he was last year. The production in sacks just isn't showing that.
No, I completely agree. And before we get to the predictions that we've been teasing at all show, like we like to do here on these Friday shows, it's time to take a second here, and we are going to talk about our friends over at FanDuel, because you can step into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. And real quickly, the line is still at 21.5. So if you're a Husky fan and you're feeling pretty confident that the UW offense can exploit this Cal defense, you might consider, throwing some money on them on FanDuel. I feel like you might be greatly rewarded for that. Now we've got to talk about our predictions, because those are always super fun. And I feel like this is always one of my favorite segments of the week. I don't know about you, because we can just kind of say whatever. And we've had a couple where we've hit on them pretty big. So do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Why not?
Please.
I think so when let's go back. We'll stick with the Cal offense, right? We're kind of
Sure.
So that means who for Washington's defense is going to reap the rewards. I'm going to kind of take an easy one. I'm going to go right back to the stat you had about Cal last season. I think Braylon Trice gets 2 sacks today against Cal. I think this really kind of, Zion had 2 against Michigan State. I think this is kind of the perfect opportunity. I could see this being like the Stanford game last year, where Washington has 6 or 7 sacks at the end of the game. Braylon's going to be leading that force with 2, but it would not be surprising to see a number of other players get sacks. But we'll start off. Braylon tries 2 sacks against Cal.
I like that a lot. And I'm going to switch over to the offensive side of the ball here, because I've been teasing this one all show, and I've kept this one a secret from you on purpose, because I want to get a live reaction here. Dillon Johnson is going to have 130 total yards and multiple touchdowns. I'm going to go 2+ touchdowns. I don't know if they'll be on the ground or in the air, but he will score multiple touchdowns in this game, because I think that just from watching the film that I did and just seeing, okay, well, this is what Cal's offense is telling the Huskies to do. I think that it's just perfect for Dillon Johnson to rack up 6, 7, 8 catches if he's asked to, and just gain a whole bunch of yards after the catch and find the end zone a couple of times, whether it be on the 1-yard line where he's just going to pound it in, or, takes it in from a couple of yards out just through the air. I think that that's very, very possible. I
like that. Key distinction, total yards, meaning could have 80, 50, that sort of split with the receiving and rushing. I like that. It's a good one right there. So
I wanted to pick a number where it was like enough to be bold, because if I said like 100 total yards, I felt like that would have been somewhat underwhelming.
Right. Now, if you said 100 rushing yards and 2 anytime touchdowns, that's still bold, because you're getting 1 and 1. So I can see that.
But I got to give him credit as a receiver there too, as you still play through your sickness here. We respect you for making it out to the show today.
I appreciate that. No, so we're going to continue on here, not miss a beat here, just like I'm trying to right now, even though I'm kind of stumbling through it.
All our YouTube viewers see it.
The one thing that I think when you look at, we know the rushing game, right? I'm going to say Washington, this is going to be a team one. This is one I think is going to be a team important one. Washington holds Cal to under, I want to say under 100, but I'm not sure that's necessarily bold. So I might even say under 80 yards rushing. I just think if this is, if this, now I think that also there's going to be a caveat here to where Sam Jackson might end up with a few more passing yards as a result of that. But I certainly think this team has the capability of shutting down. It's almost like last season against Michigan State, where they were supposed to run the ball, and Peyton Thorne ends up throwing for over 290 and a couple.
Right.
Peyton Thorne had way more than we expected to. I think that's kind of be the similar case where Cal should run the ball effectively. I think Washington is going to take it away so much, and as a result, Cal's going to get a little more chunk plays in the passing game. But I truly think, and to your point about the spread, this is kind of, yes, in traditional years, maybe Washington plays it a little closer than they should. I just think this team, this mindset, it's just so much different. This is kind of like, hey, we proved it against Michigan State where we held them to seven points, kept them. I don't know what the total yards for rushing was, but it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot.
Whatever it was, it was bad.
Right. And so I think it's kind of like you're doing that on the road. Now you're going to come back against Cal at home, starting conference play. You want to set the tone early. This is a perfect opportunity for Washington to shut down Cal's rushing game.
I like that. And I'm going to stick on the offensive side here. And this is going to be one that people are going to, when I say the original thing, and I know I'm just leading into it here. People are going to be kind of shocked, but hear me out here first. Michael Penix is not going to reach 400 passing yards for the first time this season. And I think that has a lot to do with what the plan is going to be in the run game and just what Cal is going to try to force Michael Penix to do. I hope I'm wrong because I love watching him throw for 400 yards a week. It's awesome. But I just think that this is going to be, especially when we go back to this at the end of the season, like I said earlier in the show, this is going to be one of the highest total just yardage games for Dillon Johnson. And I think it's going to be that way for the running backs as a whole. I think Will Nixon's going to have a big day. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Daniel Ngata get in there. And even just another big day from Tybo Rogers, who Ryan Grubb did say earlier in the week has been able to work his way up the depth chart, especially with the performance that he showed against Michigan State. So I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Penix, through no fault of his own, doesn't reach 400 passing yards. And I feel like, especially we were talking a little bit before the show about, the offense 2 years ago versus what it was now. And I don't think that 2 years ago I would have said, I think reaching 400 yards is going to be a little bit tough through the air.
Right, exactly. I mentioned it on Inside the Huskies in a couple of my stories where last season he didn't have his first 400-yard game until week 7.
Yep,
he's had each one through the first 3 games of the season. So I think
without playing the fourth quarter in any of them, which is I think that's the craziest part is he's played what, like 10 and a half total quarters of football.
Right, exactly. I think that'll be. I do think he will finish the third quarter against Cal. I don't know if he'll finish the fourth quarter against Cal.
We'll see.
So my last one, looking at Cal's quarterbacks, there's going to be an interception. There's going to be probably multiple interceptions, but I'm going to say Jabbar Muhammad finally gets his first interception as a Washington Husky.
I like that, and so I'm going to, because I did have an interception one, and I'm going to go away from Jabbar Muhammad, which is where I wanted to go, but I want to make sure that we split things up here and keep things interesting. I'm going to go back to a guy I highlighted in the last segment. I think Vince Nunley records his first career interception.
I can see that. But that's kind of the thing is where they've thrown multiple interceptions in 2 consecutive games. So I think no matter what, somebody which to that point means multiple players are going to get. Last season Asa had a pair in a game, but it's like this defense. It's kind of predicated on a bunch of different players getting a bunch of different sacks, not necessarily one guy having 7 or 8 interceptions. You're going to have probably 4 or 5 guys with 4 or 5 interceptions over the course of a season.
Before we get to your score prediction, I've got one more thing that I want to do here. And this is new. I'm throwing this at you live. We're going to go offense and defense here. I want your leading receiver in terms of total yards for this game, and then leading tackler on the defensive side. So I'll go first while you take a second here to just kind of think about it. I'm going to go a little bit off, just kind of off here where it's not going to be that much of a surprise, but I'm going to say Jalen Polk is going to have the most total receiving yards in this game for the Huskies. And that's no fault to Jalen McMillan or Rome Odunze, but everybody in this room is super talented. That's just where I want to go. And then on defense, I'm going to go back to the well of no surprise here and say Edefon Ulufosio leads the team in tackles this week.
Interesting. It's kind of like, dealer's choice here, right?
Exactly.
It's a 1A, 1B, 1C. Which one do you want? So give me J-Mac. I think that's a pretty fair bet. You know why I'm picking that one. No disrespect to Rome Odunze. He had a career high 180 last week. I think Polk has had a big game. So I think Jalen, this is kind of his game to eat sort of thing. It's going in rotation here. And then on defense, you know what? I was going to say Eddie's cohort at linebacker, but I don't want to do that.
In Alfonso Tupatala, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give me. I don't want to say Vince Nunley because I think that almost means because the way you have to think about this is that means that the defensive line and the linebackers are both struggling.
Not necessarily.
Right. But I'm saying like if he leads the team in tackles, I think that would be a little bit more concerning. So give me Dom Hampton. I think Dom's going to be a guy to where you're going to get the middle with the receivers and things like that, and he's also going to help in the run game. So I think Dom 8 or 9 tackles.
See, I'm surprised. For me personally, if I was going to go a member of the secondary for that, I would have gone Mish Powell because he plays so close to the line of scrimmage already in that Husky position, and I think he's just awesome in run support. So that's probably where I would have gone. So, but I like that pick. All right, now before we get out of here, Lars Hanson, what is your score prediction for the matchup between Washington and Cal?
So there's a little bit of history on the line here because Washington has never had 4 consecutive 40-point games. I think they get to 40. I
like
think
that.
they get to 48. I don't think they get above 50 just because the way the game is going to go. Give me Washington 45-10.
45-10. I like that. So they do cover the spread. You heard that, all you FanDuel users out there. Make sure you go on there, use the code Locked On, and take Lars's advice and take Washington against the spread. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here with us. And we will be coming to you not after the game against Cal, since it is a 7:30 kickoff, and we don't expect you to stay up until 1 a.m. for a live podcast with us. But we will get it to you at some point on Sunday, so stay tuned for that. But until then, make sure wherever you are watching this, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever it is, make sure to subscribe, drop us a 5-star review, leave us a comment on YouTube. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, we'll try to get back to as many of you as possible. All you everydayers out there, we really appreciate your support, and we will talk to you after the game.